I think it's going to be more and more important to be the human advocate in this process. I think sometimes technology and the speed of things we were talking about earlier continue to push design decisions to be made, maybe in a little bit of a vacuum or without all the validation and the advocacy for humanity that it needs. So whether it's sustainability or, wow, should you wear that long? Should you participate? Should you play with that? Should you put those on your head or in your ears or on your eyes? I think there's a role that we play as designers because we're in that initiating, catalyzing role.
Welcome to Design Drives, your audio experience about what, how, and why design drives things forward. A podcast hosted by Sebastian Gier, together with forward-thinking design practitioners from around the world.
In this episode, we learn from Brett Lovelady, founder and CEO of ASTRO Studios in San Francisco, one of the most forward-thinking and leading design agencies working for both startups and Fortune 500 companies in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is a series where IDSA and Design Drives collaborated to bring you the best insights from the IDC speakers. IDC is the International Design Conference that happened recently in Chicago and is organized by IDSA, where Brett and I sat together. Brett shares his learnings, founding various startups and companies like ASTRO Gaming, running a design studio for now 25 years, the future of design, and how Silicon Valley and design has changed over the years. We learn why it's important to learn about business to drive impact as a design entrepreneur, and why, how, and what design can drive forward. One of my absolute favorite episodes so far, so enjoy. All right, I'm here with Brett Lovelady, inspiration to me and also design entrepreneur, I think, which is super interesting. So we're going to talk a little bit about the intersection between design and entrepreneurship. And you're the founder and CEO of ASTRO, and you also founded a few companies during your time at ASTRO. So just for the people who don't know you, for the few, can you give a little bit of context, maybe about your journey, about the early days when you went into design, and some of the drive behind that?
Absolutely, happy to. I guess when you go back in time, it was a little while ago, after graduating from school, I landed in Silicon Valley, and right between HP and Apple in Cupertino. There's a little company called Tandem Computers. Most people don't know about it, but it was a supercomputer company. And I was fortunate to become part of an advanced concept team and started designing supercomputers and kind of with this eye on the future. And after a few years of that and understanding kind of how the Valley worked and the entrepreneurial nature of startups and new technology sort of being commercialized, I spun out of there and was fortunate enough to work for Lunar Design in Palo Alto in their early days. And then from there went over to Frog Design. And then had some great experiences, met a lot more people, kind of broadened the horizons, working for global focused companies. But I realized that I wanted to start my own brand of design. And if I was going to work that hard, I may as well get going. So I started ASTRO Studios in Palo Alto, 1994. This is our 25th year. The dawn of the internet, it was sounds so long ago. But I really liked the idea of consumer products and where I think, sort of the human side, the pop culture side, if you were the high volume kind of ADD driven side of, the fast churn of consumer goods. But we could see the technology was going to go screaming into that same space. And so started ASTRO. We went and worked on everything but technology for a while at that time. So sporting goods and toys and fashion and furniture and anything that didn't have wires, bits, and batteries was kind of our goal. But after a couple of years, you're sitting in Silicon Valley, you're sitting in San Francisco Bay Area, it was obvious there was going to come back together, and it did. We started doing a lot more technology products. So a little more than half the projects are consumer electronics. But because we sit at this crossroads between, technology, culture, it's a great place to be, and so we get to see a lot in the high volume consumer space. 25 years later, we're still doing the same thing. To some degree, we've seen a lot of different technologies coming and going, and again coming into the consumer space. So my journey has basically been to shepherd, if you will, and motivate ASTRO Studios forward. In the middle of that, started 3 other companies. One successful, one to be determined, and one failure. Learning along the way with all of those, and it's been nice to do. It's sort of a lot more empathetic toward our clients, but also sort of like most designers, having that goal to launch their own products and brands. We were able to achieve that and go through that journey and realize the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. So that's been a big part of ASTRO too. I think 20% of our business is set up to co-create or collaborate with other people. So in Bay Area, you get a lot of two guys with some money from the investment community, or you get people spinning off of big successful companies and doing startups, or serial entrepreneurs. And so anyways, all of that sort of is always hovering around. So we figured out ways to tap into that energy and benefit. But then every once in a while we get to originate things too, right? Come up with our ideas and try to find homes for them. And so that's the air fuel mix we shoot for within the ASTRO engine.
And if you founded design in 1994, you said, right?
Yeah.
You also saw Silicon Valley and whole area changing, I guess, a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how was that?
That was exciting, there's some other pioneers, if you will, that we got exposed to, like the Lunars and the Frogs and a bunch of other really good, talented firms out there, who were, the earlier people coming into the Valley. But we got to see I got to see, IDEO form, become who they were and where they were, and then Frog's transformation into digital, for example, and a few other companies bubbling up on the design scene. A lot of comings and goings. But the clientele, the Apples of the world, for example, and all their different, versions of themselves. Early on, we were meeting two guys from Google that had a big idea. We met a couple of guys from Yahoo that had a big idea. We saw Johnny Ive get hired by Apple, and we worked for them for a couple of years while he was a project manager. So yeah, it sounds like ancient history, but so you're seeing these things sort of evolve, and right there in the same playground, and it's kind of addictive too. You see so much happening at the same time. To be part of it is fun, and you're kind of looking for the next project all the time, and that sort of creates a bit of entrepreneurial design adrenaline. So.
How is it being in Silicon Valley? Driving you as a company or you as designers. How is that environment influencing the culture?
Well, the interesting thing about, I have some, philosophical reasons why I think California is the way it is, the sort of go west mentality, even the way America was formed. And I think that lives and breathes in Silicon Valley because it's also the gateway to Asia, for example, gateway to the rest of the world in some cases because of education and Hollywood and technology and all of these things kind of coming together. But there's also sort of an expectation to go there and try to do something. And it's okay to fail. In fact, do it again and try it again. There's a little bit of, I call it the gold rush mentality. We all know from, one era when gold rush. But truth is, for a couple of hundred years, every 8 to 10 years, there's sort of a new gold rush in California, whether it's land or silver or gold or water or, silicon chips and social media. So there's a lot of elements that kind of come into it, but that creates this sort of rarefied air. We also have immigrants from around the world that come there to basically, sort of prove themselves in Silicon Valley and take advantage of the opportunities. So that's created this really interesting connection to China and India and Europe, and it's sort of a technology freedom pop culture mecca, if you will, for a lot of people. And anyways, we landed there. Feel very fortunate about it. It has changed a bit over the years. It's become a bustling, very expensive, hard to get around place, like a lot of successful big cities. But again, that license to create and be entrepreneurial is in the water.
You're already mentioning digital transformation. You guys are also doing UX UI design for some projects, right? How big is the portion in terms of, you guys started off with idea, right, mostly?
That's still the majority of the work.
The majority,
yeah. But we do so many products that are connected devices or sensory driven or aware or monitoring. that I don't know how you can design just the
Without
industrial
it.
design. Yeah, like we're prototyping user experience, we're storyboarding, we're doing digital, prototyping as well, and wireframing, and we're putting together sort of the side of the experience that is very digital. And what's interesting for me about that is I think I'm being around for a while. I think a lot of that comes out of the industrial design, history and ethos and skill set, which is to tell stories and represent sort of the product and the artifacts sort of over time and space. In other words, you don't just like, there it is and its glory. It's like, I have to use this, so I have to map that out. And so now you have products that have companion apps, for example. Like, well, that's nice. Well, now it's the app and the companion product. Okay. And then so depending on the product that you're working on, now it's just they're holistic in their approach. And then you've got to talk about like brand and service and subscription models and ongoing relationships with it's like, instead of not every product needs this, but a lot of the technology driven products have this ongoing relationship side of them. And there's big opportunity from a business standpoint. But you, as a designer, you got to think about as many of those things as you can. So UX and UI designers that have been sort of extrapolated out of the process and made specialists are really important to the process now, and sometimes really lead the process.
How many people are working at ASTRO at the moment?
I hope they're all working right now.
Not at the moment, but
No, it's like, well, we hover somewhere between 25 and 30 people. That's been on purpose for years. Fortunately, working at some other places, I got to see what it was like to run global offices in multiple venues around the world. That to me sort of pulled away from what I think a design studio in my mind was, what I wanted mine to be, which is a little more hands-on, a little more intimate, a little more flexible. You get to a certain size, you become dependent on billable hours, and it becomes a little more like a law office or accounting firm or something.
A little bit more, right?
And that's understandable, and I'm glad that exists. But for us, I wanted to stay close to the entrepreneurs as well, and then have the ability to like recognize ideas within our world and hopefully enable them somehow. So size played into that, and we had 3 offices back in the 90s for a little bit, and all in California for kind of just to be on the ground authentically. We're in Orange County, San Francisco, and Palo Alto. What you don't think about at those times is you have to have operational teams that are redundant to that as well. And then what happens is people naturally gravitate to those areas that where they want to live, and that's a big part of the authenticity of what you're designing for. So if you want to be most authentic to your clientele with your point of view, though you may not be that end consumer that you're designing for, if you're coming from a place that that is for them, it's super helpful. So anyways, after maintaining all this, like, wait a minute, maybe we want to just be one studio. So we settled in San Francisco. Has a little more international connectivity, and it's a great place to live, great talent attraction.
Of course. I guess like it's also great to keep the culture, right, and secure the culture. I guess it's like with many studios, it's always hard to keep that, right? Yeah,
absolutely. That's a big part of who we are, is to try to not only develop but maintain it through different people coming and going. We hire what I like to think of as really ambitious, creative people. So in that, you recognize like they may not be there for long, and sometimes they want to try just different experiences different ways. But so the longer we can keep them there in the culture, the better. But to do that, it's a culture that they want to be part of. In the early days, and I would say all the way up till now, there's a certain amount of like people work, but then they also like hang out after, and they come in on the weekends to do their own projects, or there's this sense of like that's their playground. That's a designer habitat is what we call it. And because they have to show up every day and work and sort of feel uninhibited and comfortable to get their best ideas flowing. So the culture is been very important from day one.
What were maybe also design disciplines or aspects of design you need to grow over the time? I mean, industrial design you mentioned already, UX UI design. You were touching on branding as well. What were some of the disciplines that became important?
Well, number one from day one was industrial design and brand design. Brand design morphed into brand communications because we're really touching almost everything. Industrial design, from UI and UX, as well, but also packaging. So the biggest one from the beginning is brand. We've always had brand. We became known for industrial design. And it's about an 80-20 split, 20% toward branding and the rest. The biggest reason we had it is you need to put, I believe, your work into context early on. And naming, branding, positioning, photography, advertising, packaging, the things that make a strong consumer brand come to life need to be there from the beginning. And if you're also working with a lot of entrepreneurs, there's no reason in our mind that you should have multiple designers from multiple disciplines any sooner than you need to. And then if you're doing, so we basically want to bring brand and product together from the beginning. And so over the years, our culture is such that they're not so siloed. They may be from an expertise standpoint, but at any moment you could have both of those disciplines working on the products. That way you create a holistic property. It's not just a product. And it's not just a brand. It's sort of like, here's what I'm going to market with. It's almost the snapshot of a company. And then in doing that, we've added UI, UX along the way, packaging expertise. We'll do a certain amount of consumer insights now. We brought consumer insights in-house, so we're actually closer to the research side of the work as well. But, you strip it away. We're a design firm. That's what we do.
Can you share a little bit about what were the companies you founded on the way?
Sure. I'll tell you the first one, which is, all of them are like your children, right? You kind of you feel them very close to your heart. Yeah. You kind of help, bring them alive, and then you hope they grow up to be what you want them to be. Maybe that's a good analogy. But the first one was in the 90s, we created a company called Subpar Golf. And it was a golf company, apparel and bags, and a whole cultural brand. And it's because we were doing a lot of work in the surf, skate, snow, motorsports industry. And we recognized when we were talking to our friends in the snowboarding industry, they play golf, or surfers, when they go wherever they're going, they're like, oh, we're going to take a day and play a golf tournament the day before. But there was no brand for them. So we created Subpar Golf. We ran it through a couple of years of development, raised some capital, put together a manufacturing partner. And after some really early success, ran headlong into our manufacturing partner, kind of really making a sort of a hostile takeover of the brand. And we realized that they were kind of holding us hostage through a big part of the development phase and the expansion phase. So we had a hard decision. The hard decision was to shut it down and not continue working with someone we didn't want to work with. And learn along the way. We were pretty young, pretty naive, kind of having a lot of success early. But realize that running a business is way beyond just the basics of design. You've really got to have the other disciplines involved. In the perspective of what a business is that's delivering product, design is a really important 10%, maybe 15%. Okay, the rest is hard work with supply chain and marketing and engineering and management and finance and on and on and on. And that's every day. So you got to have people that are willing to get up every day and bust rock in those areas. They're working hard. So you learn that along the way. It's not just design. Design sort of, keeps it going and fresh and moving through. So we learned that with that program. Move ahead a few years after the .com, the bubble burst. We had an opportunity to create ASTRO Gaming. And we've done so much work with Alienware and Xbox and a variety of others that we saw this opportunity in esports. And esports was emerging quickly, but we felt that
it's huge, right?
Yeah, now it was big then. It's massive now. And the idea that there was no professional grade equipment, we felt, for competitive gamers, nor a brand for them to rally around. And so maybe with the hubris of the success in some of those products, we go, oh, let's call it Astro and start a new company. So we raised a couple rounds of venture capital, decided to pursue headsets because they were the most sort of ubiquitous, neutral product. Created the product, and then after a couple of, I guess about 5 years, decided to sell the company to a pre-IPO Skullcandy, with another audio company, a headset audio company that had a similar sort of cultural background. We sold to them. The company continued to expand, and it took off quite a bit. I actually helped run the company with my partner back and forth for a while, and then in 2017, they sold it to Logitech, and so Logitech now owns ASTRO Gaming. It's expanded quite a bit, maybe 3 times bigger than when Skullcandy sold it under their global leadership. And so it's that child, if you will, has gone on to college and is now professionally successful, and as esports has taken off. And so that's probably been our biggest success, if you will. But also we learned so much along the way, stuff that was not in design school, and really enjoyed it. A lot more empathy again for our clients even after that experience.
Yeah, sure.
And so those were in parallel. While we were doing that, I had a little passion project on the side as well called -8 Watches. And it's been an interesting one. We breathed life into it, and we actually licensed it and sold it to, well, we didn't sell it, we licensed it to another company. And they helped build it and run it for a bit. And then they decided to get out of all their licensing business. So we recently have taken it back and waiting to see what the next steps are.
That's amazing. So I'm wondering a little bit, you were mentioning also, like, you learned a lot during the way, but also the team you work with. I was wondering a little bit, are you, when you, hiring designers, you're looking for that the drive for, creating new ventures also, and like this interest in business? Or I'm just wondering a little bit about like growing this knowledge about working with all these, startups and ventures and on the business side, what works and what doesn't. I assume it's not just you who learns from that, but it's also your team.
Yeah.
So is it the designers that learn, or do you have people that are very or more deep into business that learn along that?
I think the design teams learn. Again, it's not something we all naturally learn in design school.
Yeah.
I think you have to kind of extend yourself into the business world and understand how it's constructed. Right? We come up with ideas and commercialize them, but like, what's the commercializing process beyond design? And that requires being exposed to it. Also requires a little bit of, I think internal drive to figure those things out and interest, right?
Yeah.
We have amazingly talented designers that aren't interested in that part of it, or maybe they are a little bit, or full spectrum, or other ones that are like super entrepreneurial. They can't wait to start their own company, or they can't wait to start their own brand. And those folks seem to lean into the project opportunities a little more. But that's not our expectation necessarily. Early on, we were expecting ourselves naively and designers to like fill as many of the roles as possible, and it's really not what we're suited to do. And not that some people don't have the aptitude, because they do, but we realized, we really need people that understand finance, that understand operations, that understand engineering. Like, they need to be part of the company. And just like our clients. I mean, our clients have that same sort of model, right? And it's like, okay, let's take that into account when we're sort of crafting and creating our own. Taking a step back, a lot of times when we're looking for the designers that we're looking for, I'm looking to tap into kind of the original reason I think most people got into design was just to create original ideas and bring them to life. We have those skill sets, and those skill sets have a lot of value. We as designers sometimes don't know how to value them, don't know how to like put them in place. So that's the business connection. You kind of have to like value yourself first, and then go create a model for doing that. But we look for designers that have a little bit of that entrepreneurial itch, if you will. We try to provide as much of that opportunity, even though we're working with the clients. I mean, a big part of our business is that way. But that's sort of like, I don't know, in entrepreneurial, intuitive, almost inventive quality. Those are the types of designers that we look for, that they want to come in and like not just sort of clean up an industry where they are, but like bring something new to it. And you have to create a bit of an environment or an opportunity that way. And not all projects that way. Sometimes, as it's like you got to have things defined pretty well, and so it's a mix, of having those things happen. And then the designers that are I think have the most aptitude for that are the ones that also kind of either lived in other organizations or have been involved in other disciplines, even all the way outside of design. You find people that are like, oh yeah, I have this interest in business, or I have this interest in engineering, or this interest in manufacturing or marketing, whatever, those other disciplines. And so I'm a big believer that the more you understand everyone else's disciplines, you're going to be a more successful designer, because we're quite often the catalyst for those things, or the initiator. And then we're very often the people that coalesce that, at least into the hands of the full commercialization and production side of things.
I wonder a little bit about the impact of design with how successful these ventures or how design played into that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Design was the initiating catalyst. I mean, design right now, especially when you're dealing with sort of technologies that a lot of people have access to, manufacturing, rapid prototyping, like creating a vision quickly is really important, and catalyzing that so that people can sort of wrap their heads around it. Like, oh, that's not just an idea, that's a brand concept or a company concept. So that was really important to be able to marshal the resources from design to bring these ideas to life. We call them near life experiences. And so you have to have resources available or allocated, and you got to treat them like real projects. But you also have to look for some of the shortcuts. It's sort of like, just give me a vision that feels like, a place that people could get excited about and rally around, from, financing to engineering and, or venture capital, whatever it might be. And we've often been involved before actually investment and financing comes in. So there's sort of like, our design work is almost like creative capital versus, just venture capital. But we team up together, then you're actually bringing those ideas to life faster and more holistically. For us, we had to kind of set aside a certain amount of our resource and focus to do those types of projects without letting them overwhelm the studio. At some level, we've talked about, like, okay, what if they were doing nothing but those types of projects? What is that like? And that's interesting, but you also sort of to become a little insular because you're not connecting to the rest of the world and being influenced by new opportunities and new markets.
You're already mentioning, you learn by practicing a little bit, right? But I'm just wondering about any designers who are really interested to, play out more of the entrepreneurial tendencies.
Yeah.
Should they do an MBA? Probably not. I don't know. Or how should they learn about business? Obviously, besides the learning by doing aspect.
Sure. I would never say not to learn and get broader education. I think that's really a helpful thing. I actually took the GMAT to get my MBA before I started ASTRO. Because I was like, I'm thinking about this, right? And it actually happened to be in a year when I was sitting taking the GMAT test, and all of a sudden we had an aftershock earthquake, and right in the middle of the test. And like we had to clear out and then come back and finish the test. Finished the test, okay, but I sort of took that as a sign, like, maybe you should stick to design, So, but ever since then, I've always been like, maybe more and more business acumen is going to help. So I've sort of stayed in that space to try to learn as much as possible. I think if you're going to run a business, you need to know what that is. I mean, even a design firm, after about 4 or 5 people, you're running the business more than you are designing sometimes, depending on how you structure it. So learn about how those things work, and there's a lot of great support along the way. You can get legal and accounting and finance and whatnot. But I think if you learn, again, the disciplines of business, you're going to be in a better spot. A lot of designers, I think now, it just depends on the industry you're in. I mean, the craft is the craft. That's the number one thing, is like learn about design and development of producing real goods through current, supply chain and channels and markets and whatnot. That's that's what we do. That's our foundation. Okay. But there's never been, I think, a better time to like tap into like rapid supply chain and innovation models, direct to consumer, sales opportunities. I mean, like, this is amazing what you could actually do now. You can offer your own goods pretty quickly. But it comes back to finance and inventory and supply chain, some what sound like mundane but are rapidly evolving and super turbocharged industries right now. So learn about those, right? Like, how do I get my products to people? I don't just like put a UPS label on it. Like, there's a lot before that happens, Yeah. So, anyways, I think learning the other disciplines is really important. At least get a good framework, and then because the design part is, again, super important. It's unique to the world in some ways because you're basically bringing visions to a tangible space where people can make decisions about them and understand your point of view. At the same time, recognize what it's going to be to make them successful. Your design ideas are just art if they don't go anywhere. And so to be design successful, it has to have to me a commercial aspect to it. Or, and that can be still for good. It can be for pro bono scenarios or for charitable works, or, just to help and affect the world without a very big commercial aspect. But the truth is, to even get it to that point, you've got to deal with, commercial aspects of producing and delivery of the things you're coming up with. So try to understand that part of it. And it's a little dry. A lot of designers, I look at a spreadsheet, my eyes roll back in my head, and I want to want to do anything but that, but you have to learn it. You got to learn how business operates, and then you can have more of effect. You can have more impact on what's going on.
What's also interesting in that regard is there are a lot of business programs that also include design now, right?
Yeah.
So from the other side, right? So what's your perspective on that?
I think it's great exposure. I think the fact, if we can, let people in business know that design is a strategic, value from the very beginning. It's the big differentiator, when everything's sort of the same. So, and I think a lot of the smart folks have figured that out. Like, they need to team up with designers. I think every company needs a chief design officer that's just overseeing design as well as anybody overseeing finance as a CFO or any of the other disciplines. I would recommend that for any company, large or small. Startups have a tendency to make a mistake, in my estimation, of hiring really inexperienced designers and putting them in charge of everything. And that's a tough one, because they're like, I've got a designer on staff. They do everything. It's like, well, they haven't learned what they need to learn yet. So there's a mix in there of like, okay, finding people that have. I think that any new company that is facing, not just consumers, but also business, like B2B, not just B2C type work, should still, think in terms of design. It's just like, if there's some priorities in the aspects of it, but it's communications and it's sort of brand building, and it's all kinds of, intrinsic values that design would bring to any operation. And so, anyways, I'm a big advocate of that side of the business.
And there's a lot of discussion these days also around that, obviously the democratization of design, or design thinking, being adapted, and a lot of talk about the design loses its value also to this democratization. Do you have any specific view on that side?
Yeah, but very strong one. Design's not a democracy. Okay. Now that sounds a little hard, right? So I think you talk to a lot of people where you can in the amount of time that you have, or they make expertise available, and you get good ideas. You get great crosstalk. You get a team of people making decisions and input and bringing ideas to the table. That's the democratizing part of it. And you listen, right? You don't, but there's somebody that needs to be a leader in that process. And this is where I said, like, the benevolent dictatorship side of design, which is get everything you can together, but then somebody has to make a decision, and you can get as much consensus. I've seen too many committees in big companies that just don't get to consensus. Everybody's got a big opinion, but no one says, that's what we got to do. That's the hill we run up. That's the bet I'm going to place. Because it's kind of what you're doing. You're putting a lot of money and resources into something. And it's difficult for some people to say, like, okay, wait a minute. I'm going to take a leadership role and advocate for this idea and push it forward. Okay, so that's the part when I say it's not a democracy. It's like it's a democratic process quite often, at least as much as you can have time for. Some designers don't have that. Like, they've got a brilliant idea, they need to bring it alive, and you know what? It is about bringing a full vision of your vision alive as well. Now, a lot of designers will get caught up in that, and they didn't go out and talk to enough people. They didn't kind of prove it out. So you got to recognize when you need more input, right, from other people thinking in a similar way. I mean, you've heard it for a while, and I said it earlier too. Like, design is the great differentiator. Okay, now design doesn't always come from designers. I met a lot of really smart technologists and marketing people and just entrepreneurs that have amazing ideas. So they need to team up with people that have the skill sets to visualize and articulate those ideas, bring them to life, that near life experience, right? That's where designers, I think, are great collaborators as well. But, not everybody knows good design. So if you're a designer and you say, you're in a meeting in a room, it's like, guys, we got the idea already. It's that one. Let's go. Why are we talking about this anymore? And partially because people are uncomfortable in that subjective space sometimes. So that leadership role of design, I think, is important.
There's been also a lot of talk about the rise of importance of design. You probably heard about the McKinsey study. Yeah. Where do you see this, evolving moving forward? What's your view on that?
I think it'll continue. I mean, the McKinseys is a good example of, all the business management guys have discovered design, and they are excited about, having innovation teams in-house that team up and or define things for big companies and their innovation teams. So design is early in the process, and so I think the fact that, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit, right? They're using design, which is, the art of sort of taking stuff from the blank whiteboard, or a blank piece of paper and bringing it alive is part of their process. They're like, oh, wait a minute, if we're there that early and we're helping craft what an informed concept might be, then we can rapidly prototype and innovate, and clients will pay a lot of money for that, and they'll also sign up, and we'll be able to affect the bigger programs a lot further. That's a little bit on the business management side, but it's not much different than big companies as well when they're innovation teams, their design teams. It's like what happens with the design teams, a lot of them get stuck in a very, very important role of maintaining the current products, the status quo of the next, and making incremental improvements. Unless a company will step outside and make a very strong, innovative, design-led team that actually is going out and crafting stuff from scratch and identifying new opportunities along with maybe business management, maybe marketing, or maybe just on their own, and then funneling those into this bigger organization, then they're sort of at risk of someone else doing that hard work and, their R&D, if you will. And I think that's where design plays a unique role in sort of catalyzing and starting these things. So, I think design will be around for a while for that reason. It has shifted in some interesting ways. People have amazing skill sets and can make things look real very quickly that maybe haven't really been marinated and developed as much as they should. A lot of people are really good at the programs of illustration and animation and storyboarding, et cetera, which is great. But there is a design process that kind of requires the physicality, the trial and error, the proving out or validating of things. So when you go too fast, sometimes people take the first idea and run with it. It may not be the best idea. Sometimes it's not as maturely developed as it should be. And that's where I think you'll see a lot of design going is continuing to rapidly visualize and develop. That's not going to stop, but it is a little bit of can people kind of get control of the process enough to include the right people, get the right things developed, make the decisions, and then execute on the design at a pretty high level that isn't affected by just the rapid, need to get to market, for example, or the rapid expansion of competitiveness, for example. I think more companies are sort of seeing oh, wait a minute, I need a little more time to make sure this idea is correct and developed, and kind of pushing back a little bit maybe on the rapid innovation validation side of things. At the same time is money. It's a business. People have to kind of bring new things to life quicker, and we can't because we've got some really amazing tools and partners to do that now.
Maybe reflecting a little bit also on industrial design, right?
Yeah.
At the IDC conference.
Sure.
So you also saw these industrial design, shaping or being transformed to all these years with ASTRO. Where do you see it? Where do you see the future of industrial design going?
Well, I think it's got a bright future. I'm really excited about the fact that we're integrating things in a more human way, right? A more personal way. It's kind of funny, we've gone through this, whole digital assistant side and, the smartphones and the wearables and hearables and all those things. And they're still all there. They're not going away. It's just the next evolution of them. Yeah. But they've taken on an era of fashion. They've taken on an era of, identity, much like your clothing and, your house and your home and your cars and things like that. And so I think industrial designs is, there's a lot of job security because this is sort of being permeated through all aspects of our life. I think it's going to be more and more important to be the human advocate in this process. I think sometimes technology and the speed of things we were talking about earlier continue to push design decisions to be made, maybe in a little bit of a vacuum or without all the validation and the advocacy for humanity that it needs. So whether it's sustainability or, wow, should you wear that long? Should you participate? Should you play with that? Should you put those on your head or in your ears or on your eyes? I think there's a role that we play as designers because we're in that initiating, catalyzing role. So I think you'll see some new disciplines maybe come out of what we're doing, much like UI and UX sort of evolved over the years. And it could be in this sort of human designer sort of role. And I think that's one of the things that I continue to sort of hope for a bit as well, that we don't just become, one more, cog in the machine, but we actually are, the ones that are sort of, involved, but also orbiting and monitoring the whole process a bit more. I think that'll open up opportunity for design. The other thing is I see a lot of design folks not becoming segmented and not spending all of the time maybe needed to fully develop It used to be, and this is maybe old guy talk here too, but it used to be that you could stay with a whole process and you really see it. You'd live at the factory, you'd be in the model shop, you would be in every EV build, and you would, not in every case, but you would see the full process. And I'm starting to see more and more people just doing pieces
Segments
of it.
of the design.
Yeah, and there's efficiency reasons for that. There's business reasons, but I think as designers, you really need to know, like from the blank whiteboard space to when the person takes it out of the box at their house, and as much of that as you can. So you'll start. I just think you'll see more and more specializing segments there, but maybe the people that oversee and understand the whole part of it are the ones that are becoming more rarefied. Not as many full product developers, full product designers. And that might be opportunity, I think, moving forward.
For designers, that could be an advice, right?
You kind of have to, if you're going to do your own product, you kind of do that anyways, right?
Yeah.
But if you're working for the company, there's program management, there's project managers, there's directors of all sorts. There's lots of handoffs along the way, and it's important. Don't get me wrong; that's not going to change, in a lot of cases. But I don't know. It's I'm seeing fewer and fewer people that have done the whole process and continue to do that over and over again. And maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but it feels that that's changed a bit.
There are also a couple of interesting trends that start to shape industrial design. Additive or rapid manufacturing, right? The topic of sustainability. What do you see as the major trends or things that people should really take into the skill set and be aware of?
Well, I mean, all of the sort of desktop prototyping and manufacturing tools. I mean, the ability to that's still still in its infancy a bit. Even though we use them every day, what's available to us. I think that's going to continue to create some
more.
Yeah, I think industrial design has always had the power of putting a physical object on the table or bringing it into the room, or and have people experience those things, and that's very powerful. I don't think we should lose track of that. And I think our engineering friends will do that, and manufacturers to a degree, but it's still the design version of that. And the tools are there that make that happen. So I'm hoping that we just keep figuring out the best way to use those tools to tell big stories and to have new experiences for people. I think that's going to be helpful. I mean, obviously all the CAD and illustration packages and everything else to actually get in under the hood and detail your work out is really, really important. But what we find ourselves more and more is spending time creating tools for people to make decisions to sort of move things forward with confidence. And sometimes it's to talk to their consumers, and sometimes it's to talk to the CEO, or to be the person that validates along the way. I think that's probably a little bit more of the near term. Like, it's just evolving. It's happening in real time while we're involved with it. But I think that if I hope, if you will, for the design side, and again, that human advocacy is that people recognize that, okay, the designers are here not to design for themselves, but to identify the humans in the process that can, not just the consumer nature, but the humanity side of what's going on, and we figure out ways to to talk about these somewhat subjective things like design. But to say, okay, well, you know what? None of us here are little kids or mature adults that are dealing with this, but let me represent them. Let me tell you why they need to be considered differently than, oh, that's just for kids. Well, kids are segmented and there's a lot of variance. Well, elderly folks are that way, or special needs people, or this country, or that business model, or, and again, that human advocacy in the process, I think is a big opportunity for us as well.
You're also mentioning that you had certain failures with your ventures and stuff. Is there do you have one of the maybe your biggest learnings to share from that?
Wow, that's interesting. Well, my own therapy therapists would tell you that it's better to. I don't have a therapist, but other design folks. But anyways, my would tell you that none of them are failures, because we've learned so much along the way, right? That's sort of
that enables you to be successful, right?
Right, and I think that's the key. Even successes have things that and I think this is a designer, not just a designer thing, but we're really good at being discontent with whatever is even there. Like you want to keep designing, you want to keep fixing it. Yeah. So even failures, I'm like, okay, we learned this. If we just change this, if we just, the next time we'll do that, it's sort of this kind of ongoing positive, rolling forward. Yeah. I think it's probably don't lose that, right? Like don't get so discouraged. You put a lot into every venture, and we, even for our clients and for our projects, like designers are really good at like putting themselves so in there and they care so much and they're so emotional about it, and don't become detached from it. That when something fails, and we've had a lot of things that fail in the marketplace, and it's, we look at it and go like, oh, it wasn't the design, it was poor sales or bad timing or the marketing or, any number of things. But it hurts, because you do care that much as a designer. And so when I see like a product that sort of, okay, that breaks too early or that falls apart, or there's a technology problem, or wow, we didn't think about that. I guess we could have caught that if we had tested one more time. Like those are the little failures inside of the successes that I think add up that you want to pay attention to, so that you don't repeat those things, or you can at least be that advocate for that level of improvement as well. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting how you connect it to being almost natural to designers. Failure being a part of the iterative design process designers are known to, right?
Yeah. I had an instructor once that told me, like, we were working on a project, and I was trying this thing. It was really hard to do. I won't say what it was, but it was like early in my design process. And it was like, it just wasn't working. It was just failing at every, like, this is a good idea, but it's just not working. The materials were cracking, the joints were breaking, whatever. And so, I got one day before, and I'm like, that's it, I'm scrapping it. And I started again, and I did another project, and it worked, and it met the criteria in one day, right? It was kind of a nice recovery. And my professor basically, in that piece taught me a lesson, taught our class a lesson, I guess, which was like, hey, I watched him struggle, and I saw him just like finally give up on the idea that just wasn't working and scrap it and replace it with a better one in a very short amount of time. And the ability to like recognize that in your own work and not just sort of massage it to death or hope it's going to work no matter what is also a skill set, as opposed to the one of hanging on and just fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. It's sort of being realistic with yourself. Mm-hmm. Is this the right thing? And so I've always been able to like not fall so in love with my work that I couldn't replace it with something better. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way I kind of look at things that might be considered failures, is like, yeah, but we got this far, and we'll get further the next time.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I think we need to wrap this up.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing insights. Amazing.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. You can tell I don't mind talking, and this is always a great venue. IDC and design, and like I said, I have a special place in my heart for IDSA. It's a good group, people trying to do good things, and so I'm happy to contribute.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was the episode. If you want to give us feedback on the podcast, have something to contribute to the next episode, or just want to get in touch, feel free to connect with us either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram messages, or simply via the designdrives.org website. We love to hear from you.